Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. I am Adesola Omorwan.
And I'm Rufai Sedi. Good to see you again, Adesola.
Good morning, Rufai.
Yeah.
Now, digital switchover has become a recurring decimal for Nigeria's media sector growth. The world did set deadlines for digital switchover at 2016. But till date, Nigeria hasn't effected that milestone. Edward Buck did call the media the fourth estate of the realm. But how is the Nigerian media holding forth with the challenges of fake news? Joining us this morning to discuss this and more is the former DG of the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, Emeka Mba. Good morning. Welcome to the Morning Show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. Welcome to the show, sir. Let's just start straight off. Can you just talk to us about your time at the NBC and the experiences and how it all went and leading up to, the digital switchover before we go into all the issues?
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me. I think there's initially when I took the job, the whole focus was how do you get Nigeria, the whole country, how do you move us from analog to digital, given the advantages of the digital broadcasting. It was tough, and as we see now, we haven't been successful so far in doing it. I think the major thing is we need to recognize that broadcasting is essentially very political in Nigeria, because as you have it, most of the people who own the stations are politically connected. You're not going to get a license if you're not politically connected at some level. So that's one. And there's also the difficulty that government had at that time, 2013, when I took the job, of funding. It's an extremely expensive exercise. The UK cost them upwards of £4-something billion to do the transition. In the US, it cost them, even a lot more than that. So it's extremely expensive. When we started, we did the budget with the Digi team. We got a budget of about somewhere north of 50 billion naira to do the whole transition. And at that time, it was difficult to convince the government of funding. So we had to do a number of things, engage the stakeholders, agree on a path, how to make the jump, so to speak, sustainable for everyone who's involved. But crucially, how do you raise money for this big task? So we managed to do that. When government changed, and I was, the government decided that my tenure was up.
But that didn't come just easily. There were lots of skirmishes around that time.
Yeah.
There were lots of accusations on your part. Yeah. And it was back and forth. Can you just talk us through that and how it's eased out now?
There's some things that obviously I'll be at liberty to share now. But to be honest, it was incredibly difficult managing all the different interests, stakeholder interests. Some people were not quite happy with some of the decisions that I took, which is fair. I mean, you're not being a chief executive of an agency like that is also very politically exposed. A lot of people will not be happy with some of the decisions that the chief executive will take. But the most difficult thing was actually raising the money. I mean, we had to go through many hoops to raise the money. What we did, which was, a lot of people will consider that to be quite innovative, was we said, look, we have spectrum that we needed to give up. So if we jump from analog to digital, we'll free up a lot of spectrum, and this spectrum will be valuable or more valuable to telecommunications operators, to the NCC and so on. But we were not going to be able to make the jump without money. So it was a chicken and egg thing. So what we decided to do was, we'll revalue the spectrum. We'll do what we call a refarming, and then set a target to it in terms of a number. And then we were able to convince some people to pay for it. And at the end of the day, we got a presidential approval, and we got a company, one of the telcos, who wanted it, and we were able to license them and raise the money for it. And with raising money, everybody was like, because it was a lot of money, and all kinds of things were flying out.
Yeah, but you say, I mean, yes, there's the issue of funding. Yeah. There are lots of issues. But for some keen watchers, they say, you know, the bane for Nigeria switching over has been high-wired politics.
Yeah.
For others, it's been graft, corruption in the processes, you know, in the management of the processes. I hear you say funding is the most sticky issue here, but what about the corruption in the process?
I think this is really the challenge. I mean, anytime there's a lot of money that is clear, it's visible to an agency of government, all eyes on it, all kinds of accusations, and it is you know, it's like a banana peel. You know, there's always that temptation. How do you spend the money? The process of getting the money, how is the money going to be used? Is it going to be abused? And you know, it's very difficult, I think, for any chief executive. I don't envy anyone in that position because you're going to get all kinds of accusations. But I think that at least I can speak for myself. We can speak for what we try to do is to make it as transparent, work with all the different stakeholders, and had regular meetings so that everyone who was part of that process could see where we were going. Even with that, you're still going to get people who are saying, oh, no, this person got, because we did something, we had one of the approvals we got was to do what we call a set-top box rebate system, where, because we had a government policy that said the set-top boxes which were going to be used for the digital transition had to be manufactured in Nigeria. And to do that, you know, you needed to have some kind of protection for the people who were licensed to manufacture the boxes so that you do not get gray market imports coming from China or elsewhere flooding the market. And there you have people who were setting up factories to manufacture it in Nigeria. Now suddenly it's been swamped by gray market imports. So what we did was to do two things. We set up a system and using what we call a conditional access technology to protect the Nigerian boxes uniquely to our market. That's one. And then in doing that, provide some kind of subsidy which would seed, what we call seeding the market. So if you're trying to create an ecosystem, you had to take some decision to say, we will give you this if you did this, some kind of incentive. So all those things were done. It appeared to be discretionary because there was no set rule for it. So in that instance, you'll find some people who will say, look, Mr. A got more money than I did. And obviously, that will lead to all kinds of accusations and so on and so forth. But like I said, everybody in the process that we did was based on your capacity. If you showed capacity that you could do a lot more, and you had gone forward to maybe set up the factory, we see what you could do, then you get more. It was that simple.
So it was just pretty much based on that. I know another banana peel was handling people. I mean, handling people is so important that there's a story about how Albert Einstein was given the position of being the first president of Israel, and he refused it and he said, you know what, I can handle scientific matters but not human matters, and it's quite difficult. And we know that impinged upon the process. After all you have done, where's the process now? Because I know there are some milestones. Like we talked about the 2016 milestone after the conference in Geneva by the International Telecoms Union that says, okay, in 2016, the digital switchover should be done effectively. We know it's difficult every year because look at the American case. It was just 2009, America switched over totally. Where are we now as regards this? Did the boxes materialize? Did we have the switchover? Did we have the digital channel?
I think that the switchover has started. It started way in 2015, at least before I left. We did the pilot in Jos, that, you know, just to check all the elements, because having a switchover, as you said, we all know it's managing stakeholders is number one. It's a political thing, really. Political in the sense, not just in the high wire politics of party politics in Nigeria, but politics in terms of dealing with people. Because you have people who have made a lot of investment in the analog world. You know, they've set up TV stations, huge transmitters. They're in maybe 4 or 5 cities across Nigeria. You're suddenly telling them that all that infrastructure investment in a digital space, it's worth nothing really, because now you've created a new ecosystem that said, you know, all we need from them is just their content. No longer transmission infrastructure, someone else will have to be responsible for that. So, and that person is sitting there wondering, what about my investment? What's the value of that investment? So you have to manage all that process. And then I think that the thing is, in doing the pilot, you have to have the content players, you have to have the infrastructure players, you have to have new people wanting to come into the broadcasting space, and you have the existing people saying, what's going to happen to us? Are we going to lose out in this space? Because the digital space, the barriers to entry, fundamentally different. It's less. We're all here now. Your transmission is going on. People can watch it online anywhere in the world. To set up a TV station, the cost 5 years ago, it's not the same as today. It's fairly easier. Yeah. So all of this has to be managed. But where are we in Nigeria? I think there's progress been made, but it's slow progress. It's hard work. And, sadly, it's gotten bogged down with a lot of political influence and a lot of infighting going on. But I will say that the MBC has made some progress. It still needs a lot of money to push. Whether that money comes from government or from the private sector has to be is a challenge.
But it sounds like all technical jargons we're saying here. Can you explain what the outlook of a digital switchover will be to a very layman out there? How is he going to watch TV? Is there going to be like a box? Is it going to be like
the pay TV?
Is it pay TV?
What's the difference?
Just explain it to the layman out there.
No, it's not pay TV. There's a lot of misconceptions simply because in a digital space, to move from analog to digital, you need a box. And that box is simply to ensure that because most of the television sets we have today are essentially made to receive analog signals over a certain path. So but in a digital space, the way it works, I hate to sound a bit technical, is that if you imagine that a TV station in an analog space transmits with 8 megahertz, this amount of bandwidth is required. But in the digital space, with compression, that same 8 megahertz that one channel, say Arise, uses to transmit in an analog space, you can fit 16 channels in it. So your typical TV set at home will not be able to decompress all of that. So you needed a box. And because traditionally all over the world, pay TV has been watched with boxes, set-top boxes. So there's always that confusion that it means, therefore, that free-to-air television...
So the consumer doesn't pay for it?
No.
But do I necessarily need a box? If I have... Because we have TVs these days that are very...
TVs,
So do I necessarily need a box?
Now, again, the second level of challenge is that when you compress the signals, or when we compress a signal and transmit them, we use a certain standard, a certain broadcast standard to transmit them. So unless your TV is able to receive it, and remember what I said, to protect the set-top box manufacturers, and 4, 5, 6 of them have started manufacturing boxes in Nigeria. So to protect the investment, yes, right now.
Out of the 13 license.
Yes, out of the 13
and
license.
how are they distributed?
This is the challenge.
But that's a poor number. If 5 out of 13 are manufacturing here.
I can take a wild guess why that is the case, why you have only 6 or so out of 13. Part of it was, there was a crisis that precipitated my departure from the NBC around money missing, 34 billion, 15 billion, all of that conversation. And the EFCC froze the accounts of the NBC. People who were supposed to be paid the subsidy amount were not paid. And, the fear of EFCC was everybody like, no, I don't want to touch this money again. So there was a lot of that happened. So a lot of people, for example, one of the biggest companies in Nigeria who makes, they do the local assembly of, which is Zynox. They said, no, I don't want anything to do with it. So
Zynox pulled out.
A lot of people pulled out. So I think it was just the people who, said, look, this is all we do. We're going to stick with it. So these are the people who are still doing it, I suspect. But, do you need the set-top boxes? Yes. If you have a digital TV at home today, you will still need that box to to decompress the signal and to open the signal for your TV. So you still need, because the signals are, should I say, they're conditionally protected. They have what we call a conditional access. There's some encryption.
Okay. So just to get this distinction clearly, with the pay TV, you have to do subscription monthly.
Monthly, yes.
While you have your box. But you're saying with the digital switchover, you need this one-off payment for the box.
Yes.
But you don't pay for subscription.
No, you don't pay for subscription.
Okay.
Yeah. So you pay one-off for the box?
So you pay one-off for the box, and that's it.
But I remember when America was doing the switchover, they did give coupons for people to be able to pay for those boxes. So was there any provision like that?
So we did what we call an indirect subsidy. Now, in America, they did direct subsidy, so they gave coupons, which is why it cost them a lot more money, because they gave each family coupons. Now, what we did was, America has a huge manufacturing base. So the industrial policy of government was, what do we do? And you know how coupons can be, it's better to manage the companies manufacturing, because there are just 12, 13 of them. You can manage the process with them. So we did an indirect subsidy. So rather than giving money coupons to individual homes, you made sure that the cost of the boxes, you subsidized the boxes indirectly to make sure that the boxes were actually within reach. So rather than people spending $60 to $80 buying a box, which would be the market price, the boxes were down to somewhere less than 5,000 naira.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the
How many homes have those boxes now? Even when the pilot started,
I think
how many homes have those boxes?
You know, as at last year, now I would say we have in the market probably they've seeded close to 800,000 boxes have been seeded in the market. Based on it may not be active, but sold so far by within the system, within the ecosystem. I would say about that.
Let's talk about content, because
that's number one. That's the most important thing in a digital switchover.
Content. A lot of people have expressed fears about proliferation of cheap foreign content.
Yeah.
What did the NBC, as a regulator, put in place in all of this?
I can't speak as the NBC. I don't know
because it all started. I do understand that you're no longer at the helms of affairs, but it all started under your realm.
Yeah.
Well, what is your take on the content?
Let me say this, you know, and if we look at, you're always going to find cheap content. Content will flow like water. It will go where it sees a crack. It will sit there. But content also has to, cheap content also has to run against the people's culture and the people's demand. So, for example, if we look at Nollywood, whilst we complain that there's cheap foreign content coming in, someone in Malawi will complain about the same thing, that, look, Nollywood movies are drowning out our national conversations. Someone in Kenya, I mean, the Kenyans have complained repeatedly, look, everywhere you go, Nigerian music, Nigerian movies, it's everywhere. Tanzania, Niger Republic, it's all about Senegal, Nigerian movies everywhere. So that's how content works. So we've been able to build up, this massive industry where Nollywood and our content's just really going out and representing us. And, you know, it's almost like a new digital currency. But this is the thing. So when you talk about television, it's not as successful as the movies. And the reason, I think, is that the way TV content is distributed, the way our TV market is structured, it's actually, you know, it's almost attempting to defy gravity, in the sense that a whole TV stations depend on advertising, but unfortunately in Nigeria, it doesn't work that way. So you create content, independent producers create content, they go to TV stations, they pay for airtime. So the advertising market in Nigeria is not fully, doesn't function in a way that is sustaining the TV market. You know, in 2014, we did a base study, and we found out very scary figures that advertising to GDP in Nigeria was the lowest in Africa.
Wow.
We had if I remember correctly, 0.014 advertising to GDP.
GDP ratio.
Yeah. Once in Kenya, it was 0.48, which is still low, but, I mean...
Compared to
So that means it's almost impossible for media to run effectively
Precisely.
in this country because the advertisers are not stepping up to the table.
No, they're not. But it's
like
also,
you're dead on arrival if you do media in this country.
So again, it's a chicken and egg thing. So you find that, so you needed to set up TV stations in the country. So you've gone digital, so you need new content, you need new stations to operate. New stations need funding to create programming, to pay staff, to do all of those things that they need to do, which is extremely important for the consumers to say, oh, I'm going to buy this box, I want to watch this new digital space. But the TV stations can't function because if you look at the total advertising spend on television and broadcasting in Nigeria, it's less than $300 million. So
yearly?
Per annum. So if you're going to set up TV stations, say, I shudder to think how much this place costs to run, because you guys are here, you're in London, so imagine that, how much you're spending and how much, X, Y, Z other stations have to spend. And you have also a bunch of other existing TV stations all struggling for that money. It's not sustainable.
Just struggling for $300 million.
Yeah.
So far, the experiment, if we're allowed to call that, for the DSO, presently at 7 cities, I think,
Yes.
7 states in the country. But the former chairman of the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria, BON, John Momo, did say last year that we would not ever switch off from analog if we do not recalibrate, because the process itself is faulty. I mean, he talks about middlemen and the bottlenecks that were created from the process at the get-go. What's your take?
I think there is, again...
Those who call themselves content aggregators.
You cannot do... You see, I've had to take on this many arguments with people who say, no, why should you have... You cannot in the digital... There's a way the digital ecosystem works. In a digital space, there's something called platform. Platforms work in an ecosystem. Without a platform, without an aggregator, you can't have a digital space. Except we want to create a new form of... You see, we tend to think that because we're in Nigeria, we suddenly can defy logic. We suddenly can defy the laws of gravity, that 1 + 1 will not be 2. The way a digital marketplace works is that you do aggregation. Someone has to do that. If there's no one doing it, or no one accepting that... I'll give you an example. When we came in, they said, you have to have an industrial policy that set-top boxes must be manufactured in Nigeria. That was accepted. It was there on paper. It was on the white paper. But then, when I came in, I asked, so if you have companies manufacturing boxes in Nigeria, what protects them? And everybody was looking at me like, customs will ban them. I'm like, how does that work?
So there's no legal backing to it.
So you need to understand how systems operate in the digital space and set it up in a way that it sustains itself. Now, the thing is, people challenged that thinking and fought against the model working because they felt it wasn't in their personal interest. Again, the political interest came to play. Oh, no, this will not work, this will not work. But when it was set up that the aggregators is actually all the broadcasters coming together to be part of the aggregators.
Okay, sir. I'd like to thank you so much for being here. But just one word on this new hydra-headed monster called fake news. Just one word. One take on it. It's
not new. When the Gutenberg press first came to being in the 1400s, before the Reformation, it was press. Everybody was printing and circulating all kinds of. So it's not new. The only thing digital does is that it resurrects the old past in new ways. It puts it it makes it more ubiquitous. You find it in everybody's hands. But it's the same thing. And I think after a while, when it's settled, the notion of fake news, it's not going to go away, but it's not going to be because you know where to get real source of information. Right now, everybody it's a free game. But I think after a while, in the next 3-4 years, there'll be consolidation and people will now know where to get. There will still be fake news. If you go to Facebook or any other place to look for it, you'll find it. But there'll be more sources of getting genuine news.
I'm sorry, I know we said that was the last one, but we've missed 3 deadlines for the digital switchover.
Yeah.
When do you think the Nigeria will eventually switch off analog?
I can't say that, Adeshua. I'm not in a place.
So you're not optimistic?
I'm not in a place to say that, but I hope it happens.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming
pleasure.
on the show, Mr. Emeka Mba, former DG NBC.